Well, Donald Trump has said any decision on U.S. involvement in the conflict between Israel and Iran will be made within the next 2 weeks. The possibility of the U.S. joining Israel in bombing Iranian nuclear sites risks a backlash from Trump's political base. The president campaigned on keeping America precisely out of foreign wars, especially.
I mean, you don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
U.S. President Donald Trump keeping the world in suspense as he faces the most momentous foreign policy decision so far in his second term. No one knows what he'll do, but within his administration and coalition of supporters, there are very different ideas of what Trump should do. Hawkish commentators and supporters in Congress are all in on bombing Iran's nuclear facilities.
The end of the Iran nuclear program is very close, and the world will be better off for it.
But many of Trump's most fervent MAGA and America First supporters are against military action. His former advisor, Steve Bannon, has advised Trump to stay out of the conflict. National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard said earlier this year that Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons. And influential Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said on social media, "Anyone slobbering for the U.S. to become fully involved in the Israel-Iran war is not America First MAGA." This conservative civil war came to a head on right-wing media personality Tucker Carlson's show, the host locking horns with pro-intervention Senator Ted Cruz.
On Iran,
you're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government, and you don't know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump.
Beyond the splits in Trump's base, allies have called for de-escalation, but he's shown little interest in listening to them. And Russia has warned the U.S. against military intervention, calling it an extremely dangerous step. Then there are the risks of unintended consequences. It's far from clear that America's bunker-busting bombs, which have never been used in combat, will actually take out Iran's Fordo enrichment complex. Even if they do, there's a high risk that Iran would retaliate against U.S. troops in the Middle East. That would almost certainly lead the U.S. to strike Iran again, a potential spiral out of control that could lead to full-on war. That would lead to a spike in oil prices. Widespread economic disruption could follow. Trump faces a choice between heeding advice to take decisive action versus his campaign promises not to start forever wars. The world is waiting to see which side will win.
Marzia Giambertoni is a policy analyst at RAND, where she focuses on international security and defense. Welcome, Marzia. It's good to have you on the show. Donald Trump faces a presidency-defining decision here, doesn't he? The fact that he's taking time to decide, is that a good sign?
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Nicole, for having me to discuss this critical situation. Trump's evolving rhetoric, from suggesting a nuclear deal as achievable to urging Tehran residents to flee, reflects some complex calculations his administration is facing. The U.S. has already significantly escalated its military positioning in the Middle East. 2 aircraft carriers, the USS Carl Vinson in the Gulf of Aden, south of Yemen, and the USS Truman in the Red Sea, have been deployed. B-2 bombers are in the Indian Ocean island of Diego Garcia with bunker-busting capabilities, but direct involvement would fundamentally change the conflict's nature. We're talking about putting 40,000 American troops already stationed across the region at immediate risk. Iran has explicitly warned of irreparable damage if the U.S. formally joins Israel's campaign. And we've already seen proxy attacks in Al-Assad air base in Iraq by the Islamic Resistance, or IRI. What's particularly significant is what I call the proxy paradox. Iran's traditional deterrent, its proxy network, has been severely weakened. Hezbollah is constrained. Syria's Assad regime has collapsed. The Houthis and IRI in Iraq seem to be the only proxies still standing relatively strong, and they have their own wars to fight as well. So while this opens a strategic window for direct action, it also means Iran may resort to activating dormant networks globally, including in unexpected regions like Latin America, where Hezbollah maintains operational capabilities.
The MAGA base, we heard it there in the report just now, is fiercely opposed to U.S. involvement in the conflict. Are they likely to influence him? Whose advice is he taking these days?
Well, Trump is facing very interesting political dynamics within his own party. While many Republicans support his handling of the conflict, there's significant pushback from the American First Wing that helped elect him. Kentucky Representative Thomas Massey and Senator Rand Paul, for example, are leading opposition. And Massey has joined Democrat Ro Khanna on a bipartisan war powers resolution, which requires congressional authorization for military action against Iran. And Massey stated bluntly, this is not our conflict. Prominent strategists and advisors like Steve Bannon are also warning against another Iraq. And the resolution has attracted 27 co-sponsors so far, both progressive Democrats and libertarian-leaning Republicans. And this creates a fascinating political realignment where anti-interventionist Republicans and progressive Democrats find common ground, while defense hawks in both parties support potential action. So Trump must balance his America First base against strategic imperatives and pressure from Israel. This domestic constraint is real and could influence the scope of any potential involvement.
The White House insists that there is still room for diplomacy. And reportedly, the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has been in almost constant touch with the Iranian foreign minister since Israel started striking targets in Iran. What do you imagine they're discussing?
Well, I would believe that anything that they are discussing would be the opposite of essentially avoiding any immediate risk, which would be the triggering of a wider regional war that draws in multiple powers. I'm sure Iran is doing its best to advocate for them being in good faith. And Iranian proxies in Iraq have already threatened U.S. forces. So from a military perspective, if Iran's nuclear facilities, particularly Fordo, are deeply buried and would require sustained operations to destroy effectively, Iran is aware that this would be a humongous burden, not only for Israel, but for the United States. And I'm sure is communicating that as well.
Let's talk regime change, because there is much speculation about this these days. The U.S. does not have a good track record when it comes to foreign intervention, especially in the Middle East, to force a change in command. Are they likely to give it another go in Iran, you think?
Well, Nicole, I think the fundamental issue is what I would call the succession planning gap. Even if military action successfully degrades Iranian capabilities or achieves regime change, sustainable outcomes require well-thought-out alternatives to the current system. And historical precedent shows that regime change without a viable succession plan often creates power vacuums and prolonged instability. So there is a paradox here. Many Iranians oppose their government, but they also fear broader war, and U.S. involvement could paradoxically strengthen regime legitimacy by validating narratives of foreign aggression. There's also the economic and humanitarian implications, and these extend far beyond military calculations. If nuclear facilities are damaged, we could face environmental contamination affecting multiple countries. So ultimately, this crisis represents a test of whether military solutions can address complex political problems or whether they simply create new forms of instability. And the answer will significantly influence America's approach to international challenges for years to come, particularly as it seeks to focus on strategic competition with China and Russia while managing persistent Middle East commitments.
There's Marzia Giambertoni, policy analyst at RAND. Thank you so much for all those insights. Great speaking to you today.
Thank you.